Okay, welcome everyone to today's eRequesting Technical Design Group meeting. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we all gather today. We pay our respects to our elders past and present and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. The agenda today, we've got our usual business and updates. We're just going to go through an update on the My Health Record Consent Withdrawal policy. We've also got a couple of change requests to go through as well. And then the plan for the rest of the meeting is really just to do a walkthrough of the FHIR IG. So that's going to be a sort of open walkthrough, go through what's in there. Happy to take questions or comments as we go through that. So that can be an interactive session just to talk about where we're at, because we're getting close to ballot now. So that'll be making sure that the IG is complete and got everything we need in there, and answer any questions people have as we go through that as well. So for our usual business, approval of minutes, we have the minutes from the meeting a fortnight ago. Bring it over here, put it in the chat. So these are the minutes from the meeting on the 5th of June. We've got all the details in here, all the decisions, the recording, the like. They were sent out, I think I sent those out on Monday. So hopefully, if you're interested, you've had a chance to have a look at that. So I'd like to open it up if anyone would like to make a motion to approve those minutes.
This is Chris. I will motion to approve those minutes.
Great, thanks, Chris. Do we have a second for that motion?
Hi, it's Rosemary. I'll second it.
Great, thanks, Rosemary. I will launch poll for the approval of those minutes. Hopefully you can see that right now. I take it that's you in the chat, Steph, another chair.
Yes, that is me. Sorry,
Yes.
I will update my name.
I assumed it was. It's all
Yeah.
good. I think we've got about 75% of people voted. If you haven't read them, you can abstain. Just try and get that vote up a little bit. Not counting the AI bots in here. Okay, we'll just end that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we have 13 plus 1 in chat, so 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 9 abstain. So that motion has passed, and those minutes are approved. Back to other business. So other action items, the follow-up on the My Health Record Policy reference URI, we have closed that one. Jai had advised. We're actually just going to go through a quick run through of that, but that action item is closed. Just update everyone where that's at today. And there was a new action item that was developed, that came from the last meeting, which was where we talked about how to represent non-urgent results needed by a specific date. To be discussed at a future meeting. So we don't have any proposal on that at the moment. We'll leave it there. We'll probably talk about it in the co-chairs, or if anyone else has any concepts, we can talk about it today when we're doing the walkthrough. But we'll leave that there until we decide an appropriate path for that. Other updates. So I did report, I think in the last meeting, that the FHIR work group had agreed to add the patient internal identifier into AU base. It was a change request that we had requested. That was approved, and that has now actually been implemented in AU Base and been inherited into AU Core. So that's now there and available for us to use. I'll just show you the ticket for that. So this was the JIRA that we raised for the FHIR work group. Oh, that's not it. Let me jump back to this right one. Okay, so that was the right one. So we had a ballot for comment issue about introducing the patient internal identifier to use in diagnostic requests. So we'd asked FHIR work group to add it to AU Base as an identifier type. So I can show you what that looks like now. This is in AU Core, on the AU Core patient profile. In there, you can see it inherits from AU Base patient. And what's happened now is under identifiers, these are the identifiers that have come through from AU Base. You'll see here there's a new one now, which is AU patient internal identifier. So that's been added in at our request. And showing what that identifier for. There was a lot of back and forth on getting the wording right for this, but it's a patient internal identifier in the Australian context. It's assigned to a patient by an application to uniquely identify a patient within that application. So it's different to an MRN. So implementers should be aware that when sharing patient internal identifier, that is only unique within the assigning application, unlike a medical record number. So I understand that this is something that's currently used in HL7v2 messaging. So that was something we wanted available for sort of backward compatibility. And that is now there and available for us to use in the latest release. So that's a good outcome for us. Some other updates. This is our timeline now moving into ballot. So we're here now in our eRequesting TDG meeting on the 19th of June. We have a sparked testing event that's happening in Brisbane next Tuesday, the 24th of June. So we've just taken snapshots of AU Base, AU Core, AU eRequesting. They're all available now for testing. So even if you can't attend the test event or you're not registered to attend the testing event, those snapshots are available and you can start testing using that at the moment. So this is sort of our last opportunity to ballot to do some testing, make sure it's fit for purpose. Then what we've got to do on the 2nd of July at the FHIR work group meeting, we need to lodge our notice of intent to ballot. So that's formally announcing that we intend to ballot for a working standard for AU eRequesting. So that will be lodged on the 2nd of July. Our next eRequesting TDG meeting, this one is where we will take any feedback we've got from testing, any tweaks that we may need to apply there. But we also need to do our Australian FHIR maturity model assessment. I'm going to go through that a little bit later today, talk about what that is. But that's where, as the TDG, we need to go through and make sure that the IG is fit for purpose and move our artifacts from draft to AFMM level 1. And we also need to review our variance statement, which is just identifying any variances we may have from AU Base or AU Core. And they get reported back to the FHIR work group for acceptance. So we need to do that in that meeting. So it's done prior to ballot. The meeting after that is the last opportunity for any changes. So any informative content, anything else we've picked up along the way, that meeting there is our last chance. The meeting at the end of July will be walking through the ballot process. It will be a very final review just to make sure we haven't missed anything. And then the release 1 ballot snapshot will be published on 4th of August with ballot opening on the 11th of August. So not much time left now. We're really at that end of the process now to finalise release 1 and get all the paperwork in place for balloting. So talking about balloting, if you want to vote in the upcoming ballots, so there's going to be ballots for AU Base, AU Core, eRequesting. There's also going to be a ballot for comment for AU Patient Summary. So if you want to participate in those ballots, you do need to be a current HL7 Australian member. And you need to sign up for those ballots. I'm trying to think of the date there. The sign up is between the 6th of July and the 3rd of August. So you need to be a member and you need to sign up that you want to participate in the ballot between those dates. So it is important, if you do want to participate, that you make sure your membership is current or you join HL7 and then register for the ballot. So there's a QR code there on that page where you can find out more, but that is important to become a member. Just saying, Brett, you've noticed this should be hl7.com.au. Is that in relation to something here?
Yep, just that email.
Oh, the email. Sorry. Okay.
Yep.
So that's hl7. Oh, can't work quite. So yeah, not .com.org. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yep. .au. All right, moving on to My Health Record Consent Withdrawal Policy. So this is just an update of that action item we had before. So this was the advice that Jai had given us from the department about the policy URI we're going to use on the My Health Record Consent Withdrawal profile. So this is the relevant part of the policy is My Health Records Act 2012. There's a link there that takes you to the legislation. Put that in the chat if anyone. Well, if I can copy it, let's see. No, can't copy it. Copy. No,
I've just put it in the chat.
Oh, great. Thanks, Steph. And the particular paragraph that is relevant is paragraph 45D, which this is as part of 45. It's a condition of registration of a healthcare provider organisation. The healthcare provider organisation does not, for the purpose of the My Health Record system, and then part D here, upload to a repository a record that includes health information about a registered consumer if the consumer has advised the record is not to be uploaded. So that's what we're using the profile in eRequesting with the My Health Record Consent Withdrawal Policy. That's basically the patient's request not to have the report uploaded to My Health Record. So as part of the previous JIRA, we had that 49806. We had approved the My Health Record Consent Withdrawal Policy, and there was an amendment to that with the addition of a My Health Record Policy reference URI. So that's what we're talking about here. So the values we have for that we've been given by the department is a reference to the authority is health.gov.au, and then a link to that legislation. Now, as part of that, the way that legislation site is set up, you can't reference a particular paragraph or anything. It's basically a large text document. So we have just referenced the whole legislation itself, which is the My Health Records Act 2012. And we do now have a couple of change requests, which we'll talk about some of the other things to clarify around how that works. Happy to take any questions about that at the moment, if anyone's got any. But otherwise, we can jump into relevant. Oh, yeah, so David?
Hi, yeah, look, I'm just wondering, has there been any sort of thought given to that consent withdrawal being managed by the agency or ADHA at the My Health Records end? Just because, like, I'm thinking about situations like hospital care where maybe you've got lots of health providers involved in a patient's care episode. And, you know, so they might tell the nurse on the ward, hey, you know, I don't want my records uploaded, but then how does that sort of, do you know what I mean? You're a provider, you might not have been advised that the patient didn't want their records uploaded. That then becomes problematic. So, you know, it's all well and good to say, you know, that there's a legislated right for the patient to not have their records uploaded, but I'm just thinking in practical terms about how that gets back to the person actually providing the service or the organisation providing the service.
Kathleen, sorry, do you want to talk to that? Okay, I might address that. So the role we've got for this My Health Consent Withdrawal policy is essentially mimicking the checkbox that is on existing request forms, where there's often a checkbox which is do not upload to My Health Record. So this profile in eRequesting is to sort of provide the equivalent of that in an electronic format. So this is at the point when the request is made, to being able to say that the patient doesn't want the report uploaded to My Health Record. So this gets passed through with the request, and is then when the report is generated, the filler would be able to check this and say, oh, they've provided a withdrawal consent, so we won't upload this to My Health Record. So that's the role of this. I think there are other, obviously, factors around My Health Record and whether they've actually opted out of My Health Record and some other things. We are going to go into a change request now, which is going to adjust the wording on this profile, which talks about this is not an enduring consent. This is just for this request. So it is per request, the consent, the equivalent of checking a box on a form when it's done. Does that help, David?
Michael?
Oh, sorry, I got others. Yeah, Kathleen, you good now?
It does, thank you.
Yeah, I thought I might just clarify this, and yes, I know this is for community, but it might help in understanding how this works in at least acute care, and it should happen the same in all providers. When you come in, you sign a consent form, and in that consent form, it usually has a statement that says that we will upload to the My Health Record as just a generic type thing. And then if they want to say no, they don't want anything uploaded to the health record. I know we're talking about a specific request here. They usually do a different documentation, or there's a different process to actually capture that. So that's captured at more the system level on that individual. Now, there's still a requirement, I would expect, that if that's not being captured at system level, that it is a personally controlled record, so they have the option to exclude things coming into their record. And we sort of work under the premise that unless they say something, it's uploaded, if that helps, and then it's up to the individual to actually, but we have to have a statement that says we upload to the My Health Record, full stop. But that's for each community, whichever practice we're talking about, whether it be a physio, whether it be community health centre, whatever that is, a GP, it's up to them on how they manage that process themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Kathleen. And so this is just about providing this information in the exchange of a request from a placer to a filler, but that doesn't mean those systems may maintain their own consents outside of this exchange of information. And this just gives the ability of, with a request, being able to provide the withdrawal of consent with that request. It is optional, so it's only provided when there is explicit withdrawal for this request, but that doesn't mean it's not going to get withdrawn because of other consents that exist in systems elsewhere. It's just for the exchange of information, how that happens between the placer and the filler.
And to be honest, anyone who's that keen on not having it uploaded will usually go in and do stuff in their My Health Record to stop it as well. So I think it's a great option.
You can't stop it from within the My Health Record. So you can hide your record and that still doesn't stop it. You can't withdraw consent in the My Health record. It'd be problematic too as well, because then there's no granularity to it. Like, so a patient might be able to push a button in the My Health that says, don't allow anything to upload. But then there's no granularity, like, oh no, I want that to upload, just not this to upload. And that's why it's driven from the uploading provider, you know, the health service uploading, you can withdraw consent. And then in hospital settings, it's, as Kathleen explained, it's usually like an admission. They sort of ask the question, have the opportunity, and they usually put it in their PAS system to say, for, you know, the patient has withdrawn consent in this admission, and then that's filtered through PAS PMI feeds down to the subsystems to say this patient's withdrawn their consent. So an ordering system can then pre-populate that box and say the patient's withdrawn the consent at the PAS level for this request. Of course, there's holes and timing issues with all that, but it's kind of the way it works.
Yeah.
Jai?
Yeah, and I think it's just good to reinforce that this is the starting point for this standard. So we're just trying to, like you said, Michael, just replicate that checkbox for the moment as I guess the small scope within what we're trying to achieve here. But as we move into release 2 and other releases and looking at that, you know, that focus around a national capability, we'll need to think more broadly about what does it mean for consent in general, as well as specific to My Health record upload. So there'll be future opportunities to sort of dive into that more deeply in terms of what we need.
Andy?
I was just going to reiterate, one of the challenges with checkboxes is that when they're checked, it is obvious what they mean. When they're unchecked, it's not always obvious what they mean. And in this case, when the box is not checked, it is not making any statement about withdrawal. So there could be some other mechanism to withdraw that we're certainly not, I think, saying anything about that. We're simply saying, as you pointed out, Michael, that this is an explicit request, well, a part of this request, which say do not upload. So we've got to look at it in that context. This is not used if, for instance, you can't specify using this mechanism upload to My Health record. That's not part of the play here.
Yep, correct. It's probably a good lead in now to the change request. Steph's going to take us through this. So we've got a number, these are a number of change requests we're going to go through today. Our first 2 are related to this My Health record consent withdrawal. So we'll just, good lead in just to jump straight into the first one, I think. Steph, are you right to talk to this one?
Yep, I'm good to talk to it. Okay, so the first one is about updating and adding some usage scenario and a bit more of a description to the profile for My Health record consent withdrawal. So the description that we've suggested is this profile sets the minimum expectations for a consent resource to record, search and fetch a My Health record consent withdrawal. It represents a patient's withdrawal of consent to upload to My Health record in accordance with paragraph 45D of the My Health Records Act 2012, which we've just gone through. It is based on the consent resource. It's base for consent, and identifies the additional mandatory core elements, extensions, vocabularies, and value sets that shall be present in the consent when conforming to this profile. And then following that, to add to the profile as well, a usage scenario. So that is, a patient withdraws their consent to upload a pathology or imaging report to My Health record. This is a per request indication only and does not represent an enduring consent preference. Any comments on that? Any feedback? And Kathleen, we did notice your comment on that JIRA ticket. So you say, yes, we're clarifying that it is to do with the patient withdrawing consent at the time of the pathology or imaging request.
Right.
Yep, and not to do with managing overall consent. So hopefully that usage scenario addresses, provides that clarification.
Steph, did you want to make a motion?
Yep, I'd like to make a motion to accept this change request.
I'm happy to second that motion.
Okay, thanks, David.
Yeah, great. Thanks, David. So we've got Steph motion and David as a second. Any other questions or comments about this before I launch into a vote?
Where do I send my issues? Because I have some.
What's your issues, Brett?
I'm not sure it should be opt-in. The data doesn't.
We've already
refer to
agreed
the-
on the profile. We
Yeah,
did that
the
the other
data
meeting.
Yeah, I missed that one. Yeah, the data doesn't refer to what you're consenting to, because you're actually consenting to the outcome of the request, not the actual request.
We might need to do that as a separate.
Yeah,
given
I'll
this is
go
about
for
the
it and see what
description. But
yeah,
happy
that's fine.
if you do have any issues with what's done. If you want to raise a JIRA, we'll happily go through it in the next meeting.
I'll have to go and think about it. But
yeah,
thanks.
but we can have a chat too if you want out of session.
Cool. Cheers, thanks.
No problem. All right. Any other questions about this particular change?
I think the usage scenario at the bottom, the dot point needs to be plural on reports. Patient withdraws their consent to upload a pathology or imaging. Patient withdraws their consent to upload pathology or imaging reports to the My Health record. This is per request, because one request can create many reports, right?
Yeah, but in data management, we don't, plural doesn't mean any different, right?
The question, the formal question on the pathology reports as specified by the agency is plural.
The formal document.
So if you go look at the actual printed documents, there's a statement on that says, do not upload reports to the My Health record.
Okay, so as long as they're alignment, that's what you're saying. Make sure the wording's on.
Yeah, it's more that alignment is what I was getting at.
Yeah.
I agree. I wouldn't call my database table, pluralized or.
Fair enough.
Okay, so it's a friendly amendment. Steph, David, you happy to accept that friendly amendment to change them to reports?
Yep, I'm happy, thanks.
Yep.
Just to get on the bandwagon of plural, this is a per request indication. I think many are going to read that as a per service request indication. And that means, does that imply that then you would need a separate consent for each service request, as opposed to this is for, and this is getting into the whole area of requests versus orders. So yeah, this is probably a little
Good point. No, good point, right? Because I go in for a service and I get these 5 things done. And I'm saying all 5 things aren't going up, sorry.
But even one of those 5 things can be many reports.
And they're still not going up.
So just, you can have like full blood count, some standard tests and a HIV test, right? And you go, I don't want that HIV test to go. The rest they can go, but the HIV test can't go. So HIV is probably a bad example, but HIV test could be 2 reports, right? And maybe not in that scenario, but so even one service request can produce multiple reports.
Oh, yeah, but that wasn't the point I'm making, is that this kind of implies that you can do a consent per service request.
Yeah.
And you can. We typically don't. The V2 standard allows you to do that, and the providers rarely are able to service that ability. But I think in our interoperable layer, we want to support that ability for the future going forward, right? Even though the providers, such as Sonic, and I don't think it's any different for Helix JCL, we do not support the ability to have one request and you say, oh, this one can go, that one can't, this one can, that one can't. We just can't service that ability. But in the messaging, at least in V2 messaging, the ability is there. We just all default and say, if anything in this request says don't upload, then we're not going to upload anything with the whole group, right? Because that's just our incapability to do it. But at a messaging layer, I'd like to think in 10 years from now, we might have that ability, and the messaging enables that ability. Or I shouldn't say messaging, should I, Andy?
Steph?
Yeah, Michael, do you think it's helpful if we have a review of the consent withdrawal profile? Just because the data.reference, we've constrained it to reference the singular pathology request or imaging request.
Withdraws their consent to it.
I'll put it in the chat.
I think also
It's right down the bottom.
This
right
is
down the bottom. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so
What am I looking for?
data.reference. Yep, down the bottom. Reference. So then it references the pathology or imaging request.
So it is per the way it's modeled at the moment, it is per service request.
Yeah, but the data is plural.
Yes.
Yeah, data.
So kind of
Yeah.
multiple.
Yeah, multiple.
Yeah.
Reference all of
So
them.
which is depicted in our profiles diagram, the overview. So
that's kind of the issue with reference to implying that the consent is for a request, whereas the consent can actually be for many requests.
yeah, many. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I think we can take that as a friendly amendment as well, just to make sure that it's not constrained. The wording doesn't constrain it to. Sorry. Make sure I'm on the right one. So the wording was to make sure that requests was plural. Sorry, that reports was plural. I think this per request, we can adjust the wording there. I don't think we have to agree on the exact wording here. We know the intent that TDG wants out of this. If we accept that as a friendly amendment to make sure that it doesn't indicate that it's only a one-to-one relationship for that request. Is that acceptable?
Yes, that sounds good.
Yep.
I
No.
always say the word group, Steph. This is per request group indication. Even that might not be true.
Yeah.
We can play with the wording a bit. I think we know the intent. We don't necessarily have to agree on the exact wording here.
Yeah, because again, the argument will be, well, my request is this request. So it's a recursive request. And then it's just, so for each request, I've told you what I want.
We interchangeably
how you choose to implement it, I suppose, too, right?
we interchangeably use the word request to mean the group, but request can also mean one of the service requests. Yeah.
What are you requesting? Uh-oh.
Someone
wants to jump in here too now.
So this is going to be a one consent per order, and the consent.data is going to be a request or the result, because this consent is regarding the results not to be uploaded.
Yes, that's correct. It's about uploading the results of the report, which is the intent of the current practice.
Yeah, but we are referring the request here in the data, not the results.
That's why we define the meaning as dependence and not instance.
Dependence. And pathology has to update it with the results later to link it.
Yep.
Okay. Are we happy to launch a vote now, accepting this with the friendly amendments?
Have we constrained or not that there could be two consent resources in a group?
It's not constrained.
Yeah. So you could have a consent resource per service request, not saying, but you could also have one consent resource that points to all the service requests.
Yeah, I think that applies to our model for grouping, right, where it gives you the ability to mix and match depending on the requirement. I think the normal approach would be it's across the whole order for most things we're doing in groups, but it gives you the ability to
you could do either,
be specific if you need
what
to.
I want.
Yeah. So it sounds like you can orchestrate as you're working through your list this consent object.
You can be as granular as one consent per service request, or you can create just one and point it to all of them. You can do both.
Yeah. It supports both.
It would be an error to point 2 to 1 and conflict each other, but you could do it.
Can this be a part of service request transport supporting info? Instead of the consent should point to service request through data.
It's not the way we've modeled it at the moment. So just noting back on the way it is modeled at the moment. This is how we have it at the moment, where it does point to the request. So it's not been identified as supporting info, it's the other way around. So we can't, I mean, again, welcome. I think Brett's going to have a review of this. If you want to review this and suggest other things for the profile, we are just in this particular JIRA talking about the profile wording, not the specific details.
Yeah, my only concern is with the reverse linkage. The biggest issue is when you are looking into the resource, you don't know there is a relevant resource living somewhere. That's the problem with the reverse linkage.
Yeah, it's the same with
but this is some sort of sensitive data, right? It's not something that we can miss or let it live independent. As a reverse linkage, you go and see, is there a consent living for this order? But when I'm looking the order, I should see there is a consent.
It's the same for communication requests though as well. They're reversed. So you would miss all the communication requests as well. So is
it mandatory that consent has to point to something, and therefore you can't not do that one? And then is there something I don't understand very well? Isn't there a recursive linking problem if you go both?
I think I described, like, when I'm looking into the service request, communication requests or other resources can be like required or by use cases thing, right? But consent is something, this MHR something is a sensitive or legal thing that come up into your consideration. When I'm looking into the service request, I want to see that information readily available, that whether this service request has a consent or not. But if it is a reverse linkage, then I can't get that information from the service request. So that's my way of thinking, where I'll just putting a thought, like people reading the service request might not read the consent if they don't putting into the query. But if they are reading the service request, they can see the service in the supporting info that the request has the consent information living inside. Just a thought.
Yeah, we might have to come back and decide if we want to revisit that, because we have actually made all the decisions on the profile and modeled it in this way. Doesn't mean we can't change it, but I think if we do have another proposal to do it differently, we should tell Winder if you wanted to prepare a proposal to bring to the TDG on that and suggest an alternative way of doing it. We can then revisit that.
So supporting information literally reads additional clinical information about the patient or specimen that may influence the service or their interpretations. Consent doesn't really fall into that category, does it? Like additional clinical information. Consent's not clinical information, administrative information.
Yeah, and it is the way consent is modelled, designed to point back. So I mean, it's part of our eRequesting. We've got a must support on it. So I think it is something when you're building a system, you do have to be aware and look for a consent resource and see if it's part of the request. The same as you're going to have to look for communication requests and the like. So it is part of our model, is part of must supports and obligations. So I think while it may be easier to do a query when you're just linking off the service request to other resources, it's not going to give you a complete request if you're going to do that. So, but we can revisit them as other proposals they come in. I think for the moment, we probably just do need to finalise this specific request, which is just about the wording. Right? This is not about any normative changes to the record. This is just the description of the profile and its usage scenarios. So I'd probably like to try and get this vote to occur, and we can then move on. So unless there's any other questions about this specific wording, we might launch this vote.
This is a vote with including the pluralization thing we talked about at the bottom.
Yeah, in the friendly amendments to change the report to reports and adjust the wording on per request to cater for an order. I will try and find the vote for current motion. I'll just give that another 5. Well, actually, we've only got about 50% participation, so it'd be good if more people can vote. If you have a particular opinion, you can abstain. We get one more to get us over at least 75%. There we go. We're getting up there now. Okay. Let's give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we have 22 plus 1 in the chat, 23 affirmative, 0 negative, and 6 abstain. So that motion has passed. We are going to stick with consent withdrawal. There is another JIRA here for that around cardinality and must support in the consent policy. Steph, you'd like to take us through this one as well?
Yep. So as we've talked about, we've got the advice from DOHAC that the Consent Policy Authority URI is those fixed values. But to firm it up, we would like to constrain the cardinality with the following suggestions. So consent policy is 1-to-1 and must support, and same for consent policy authority and consent policy URI, with default obligations for each of the eRequesting actors to apply.
Yeah, so this one is just, we didn't mention it when we had the amendment to the previous JIRA about adding the policy URI. You will see here in the policy URI where there's no obligations on it, that it's optional, but we do want the fixed value. So this is just tidying that up to make it complete. Do you want a motion, Steph?
Yep. I'd like to motion to accept this change proposal.
I'm happy to second that one.
Oops. Any questions or comments about this before I launch a poll? No.
Can I just ask why you're making it optional? Why wouldn't it just be fixed mandatory? Oh,
not
no, sorry.
optional. The
Sorry,
proposal.
looking at the wrong line.
Yep.
Ignore.
Okay. I might launch poll then. Look. Okay. You should say that. Purchase that current motion. And we've got about 60% of people voting, so we can get that up a bit more. A couple more if anyone's there. All right. We'll give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in that poll. So we have 23 plus 1, so 24 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstain. So that motion has passed as well. Now jumping back. Steph, while you're still going, do you want to talk about the last one, communication request? I'll come back to the out of scope one.
Yep. So this one we just noticed when we were doing some testing this week. So for the communication request, the abstract profile from which we have the downstream, so the child profiles about urgent results to provider and do not perform, for patient and copy to. We've got the communication request sender constrained to 1.1 of type referencing an AE core organization. So the definition of a communication request sender is the entity. So person, organization, clinical information system or device, and we've constrained that to organization, which is to be the source of the communication. So here we're suggesting that the cardinality of that be relaxed back to 0.1 as per communication request base R4. And the rationale for this is that if the placer system is creating the communication request, they may not know the organization sending the communication for unassigned requests at the time of creation. So relaxing this back to 0, back to being optional, supports this scenario.
So, but the definition there says it could be the entity could be a person, organization, clinical information system, or device. So it's not a person.
We had originally agreed that it was organization. So we'd constrained it to organization. But I think what Steph's trying to highlight is that the placer creates the communication request, but they don't necessarily know who's going to send the communication to the patient when it's unassigned. Actually, I'll bring it up, Steph, so you can talk.
Yeah, I guess it would be good to tidy up that definition then at the same time.
But that definition is from the base, like syntax.
Right. Yep.
Great. So our layer on top of it.
Yeah. That's what we've made it mandatory that the sender.
Sorry, I should have included.
Sending.
Yep, that we have.
Ours is organisation sending the communication.
So why was the text conflicting in the thing that we're voting on then?
Because I would say the processing system. I'd want the processing system to come through, so at least I know, or the device that pinged me.
I think what Steph's trying to highlight here, so we'd agreed that it's an organisation. What this is for this profile, we'd constrained it to organisation because we're not getting into that level of detail right from the filler. The filler is going to send out the communication request, the actual communication. The this communication request is created by the placer to say the filler can communicate with the patient, or I want an urgent communication, or I want a copy to, but the placer doesn't necessarily know who the organisation is that's going to fulfil the request. In an assigned request, they may know, but they may not actually go to that filler. And if an unassigned request, the placer doesn't know who's going to fulfill it. The patient's going to turn up somewhere. So,
sorry. So in short, is that you're saying that we don't really know the sender because it might not be determined yet?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I get all that. I'm just back on the page we're voting on. And I agree with David pointing it out. So why is it there? Why does it say?
Sorry, too many windows open. Which one was it? That one.
That one. So why does it say definition, the entity, person?
Sorry, I should have maybe highlighted that was just background to the change request, and maybe I should have included.
It's the international definition of that
Yeah.
property.
Yep. So I was just including that as background information.
Here we go. So it's
in our
here.
profile,
it's in the definition.
Yep. In our profile.
It's sender.
Yep, sender. In our profile, we have specified that the sender is an organisation sending the communication. And
so why don't we just put that description in the thing we're going to vote on?
Yeah, so I'm not proposing a change to the description at all. I think organisation sending the communication is exactly what we intended. The change request is just about the cardinality.
Agree. Okay.
I just wanted to give context as to.
Why don't you just get rid of the definition thing?
Yep.
Well, so what we can do now is, so this is the background. So this jury's been raised. There's some background. There's a suggestion. So we as the TDG can now agree on what change we want to apply, and that will become the resolution. So this was really just the ticket to raise an issue. So now we can agree, and that's where someone can make a motion here where we suggest we just adjust the cardinality from 1 to 1 to 0 to 1, right? And that's the only change we would apply if that's what we agree on.
Yeah. No, I'll make the motion then to make it an optional cardinality on that relationship.
Communications. Do we have a second with that?
Zoran, a second.
Great.
Good man, Zoran.
Any other questions or comments before I launch a vote on this? I will launch a vote. I'm still sharing. Okay, so this is a vote to change the cardinality on communication request sender from 1 to 1 to 0 to 1. Okay, we'll give that just another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And home. So we have 20 plus 1, 21 affirmative, 0 negative, and 6 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thanks, Steph.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I was going to talk through the next one we have here is about an out of scope clarification for a eRequesting release 1. So today we've been working through priorities in eRequesting. We're now very close to ballot, and the ballot is for release 1. And there are a number of things that we have prioritized for release 1 at the moment. So I wanted to try and see if the TDG would want to make an affirmative statement around these being not in scope for R1. They're not just things that we never thought about or considered or the like, that we understand that they're important, but they would be part of future releases rather than release 1. So there's a proposal here that we clearly define in the eRequesting FHIR IG that aspects were considered but not prioritised for inclusion in release 1 to help clarify the intended boundaries of the release. So this is about the release being around identifying the data model and the interactions for eRequesting, and things like the authentication, authorization, auditing, the barcodes, QR codes, provider and resource location patterns, claiming orders, and sort of additional detailed supporting information. The things that we're not looking to include in release 1, that these would be included as part of sort of future releases or downstream IGs that are brought in. So be interested if anyone's got thoughts on that, about that we're comfortable that these are things that we're not including, not that we have time, given we're going to ballot in a matter of weeks, really, and finalising it now. But really just being sort of turning this around to say that we know they're there, they know they're things that are important, but they're not part of our initial release of eRequesting. Does anyone, maybe I'll turn the question around, does anyone disagree with these statements of these things being out of scope for release 1? Actually, and that's a point that Michael Osborne's put in the chat here, that this will help with our ballot reconciliation. So by putting this statement in the IG, when people are going through ballot, it will frame it for them. So rather than raising ballot issues and going, oh, you haven't put barcodes in here, or you haven't put whatever else around this in here, that we're making a statement to say, yeah, we know we haven't done some of these things, but they're not part of release 1. When we're doing reconciliation, we can say, yep, these would be priorities for the next release, but not part of release 1.
Do you really want to make a concrete statement around scope? Because in that case, the not prioritised for inclusion is kind of a bit of a woolly way of saying these aren't in scope for release 1.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think it's basically saying that we're aware they're there. I mean, a ballot issue may get raised and saying we have to do this for release 1 for this reason, and it's compelling, right? And so I think the wording here is about that hadn't been prioritised. If something comes up in ballot and we have to reprioritise and say, yeah, you know what, really good point, we absolutely have to do this and we can't do release 1 unless we include it, that the TDG will review that and accept that. But this is just sort of framing it, especially if people who are outside of our community are reviewing the IG, that they understand sort of the boundary for where we were looking for release 1. But it's not, they are out of scope and we will not even consider anything around them. It's more just framing that they were considered and not prioritised.
To me, it's just purely an acknowledgement and I guess advice around where we've landed. It's not prescriptive as to you can't talk about this and you can't raise questions about it. It's more this is where we've landed and acknowledging that that's the current situation.
Yeah. I can't make a motion because I'm chair. Is anyone else interested in accepting this?
I'll motion it.
Thanks, Joe. Anyone would like to second?
I'll second it, Michael.
Thanks, Angus. Any other questions or comments before I launch on? No. All right. I'll launch a poll. This is just a vote on the clarification for out of scope for release 1. we've got a reasonable number of votes there now, so I'll just give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I'll end the poll there. We've got 20 affirmative, plus 1 in the chat, 21 affirmative. We've got 2 negative and 6 abstain. So the motion has passed, but anyone who voted negative would like to make any other statements, you're welcome to at this point.
The only statement I would make is it's just a bit wishy-washy. Neither here nor there.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of
to me, scope is black and white, not areas of grey.
Yeah. I think it's probably the nature of us going to ballot now, so that we do have to consider everything that comes through ballot. TDG will vote on everything that comes through ballot. So yeah.
But do we have an area to say what's in scopes?
Yes, we do. We had previously agreed through the TDG. So this, as we're going through now, what we're starting to do is add some guidance into the IG. So we do have, you'll actually see, if I bring it up, this was probably decided very early on in eRequesting history, but under discussions on scope, we do have some of these discussions here about things that are in scope and out of scope. So we do have material that's been discussed in the TDGs and agreed on, and we'll start putting that guidance in the IG as the supporting material. One thing we didn't have though was around some of these things. We had a list of features, and these were some of the features that were on there, but we hadn't actually explicitly said no, we're not going to do them in R1. We just they didn't get prioritized exactly like these wording is stating. So that's kind of where we're at. I think if we had more time, we had another year, we'd put all these things in, right? So, but that's what future releases would be the place for that. We will, in future releases, prioritize what goes into the next release, and it's an iterative process ongoing.
Just the words just seem to be not prioritized for inclusion, it would include.
Yeah.
There are other things that we wouldn't include either, but we just haven't mentioned that line. That's how I read it.
We're just trying to deflect some ballot comments. So someone might put a ballot comment and say, you haven't addressed claiming, or you haven't addressed barcodes. And so we're trying to say, well, we intentionally did not, just because you put a ballot comment in doesn't mean that we're going to squeeze it in.
I don't have a problem with doing some clarification. It's just the wording seems a bit. What are you not saying is right?
Yeah, I think so. This wording won't. So this is really the intent. So this is the TDGs agreeing on the intent here. The exact wording will be tweaked as it goes into the IG. Right. So this was to get the intent that we're basically agreeing as the TDG that we considered these things, but we didn't prioritize them for release 1. So the exact wording will tweak a little bit when it goes in. It's really making sure that we agree on this intent, and there's no one here saying, no, we absolutely should have done these things and we didn't do it, but we need to.
So really what we voted on is the top sentence.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And some of these points that we knew were in our backlog, right? These things were in our backlog. So
it's really just that sentence above the dot point list, which reads weirdly, isn't it?
Yeah.
It should be said these aspects were not prioritized for release 1.
These are ones we know we didn't do, right? And there could be others that people might come up with that we don't know. Right?
Yeah, the would include at the end is kind of weird.
Yeah.
I think you should
acknowledge that.
I think you should bank this ticket for ballot. If these things come up, you can just say, well, we already decided they're not in scope. We're going to defer that issue. So just, put it in there.
Yeah, but I think it was important to raise it now before we go into ballot, so we don't go, oh no, we just forgot about these things.
Cool.
Make that act. Okay, thanks, everyone. So that was all the change requests we had for this meeting. The next portion of the meeting, we've got another about 20 minutes, was to go through the IG walkthrough. Again, this is part of the sort of completeness check to make sure we're in a good place moving into ballot. The first thing I wanted to talk about was our Australian FHIR maturity model levels. We had previously agreed in a TDG that we are targeting AFMM level 1 for this ballot. As part of a ballot for working standard, we cannot ballot artifacts that are draft 0. So all of our artifacts at the moment are all draft 0. So we need to move them all to AFMM 1 prior to ballot. Our next TDG meeting is to go through that process to affirm that we are comfortable that they are AFMM level 1. So the draft is just a resource of profiles being published in the current build. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been going through TDG, making decisions. We've been putting those changes into the IG, and everything is at a draft 0. And I can show you that. You have a look at any of our profiles. At the top here, you'll see a maturity level 0, which means they are 0. So all of our artifacts in eRequesting currently have a maturity level of 0. We cannot go to a ballot for working standard with things that we need to get them to AFMM level 1 at least. And that's draft, plus the artifact produces no warnings or errors during the build process that have not been accepted by the responsible work groups. So that means it can have errors. We just accept those errors. We understand what they are and why they're there, and we accept them. And that we've also, the work group has indicated they consider the artifact substantially complete and ready for implementation. So that's the key part there too, is we have to agree that these things are complete and ready for implementation. So the next level up, which is like AE core, is targeting AFMM2. We may find some of our artifacts are ready for AFMM2, but the level for that, it's been tested and successfully supports interoperability among at least 3 independently developed systems leveraging most of the scope, e.g. at least 80% of the core data elements, using appropriate data scenarios based on at least one of the declared scopes of the artifacts. So this is actually taking it a next level, which is saying we've tested it and it has to be at least 3 independent systems that have tested it, and that will take us to AFMM2. So that's optional for us on some of ours. If we've done sufficient testing, we can mark them as AFMM2, but we have to get them to AFMM1 if we want to ballot them for working standard. If you want to read more about this, I'll put it in the chat. Which talks about the definition of the maturity levels. So for it to be AFMM level 1, it's considered complete when we've done quality assurance. So the artifact has no warnings on the build process in the QA report, and the IG modeling terminal and facilitators report the primary committee. And then so that would be the FHIR work group, I believe. And the primary committee assesses the completeness through mechanisms committee discussion. So that's actually us, I think. Snapshot, FHIR, IG publication, connectathon, and draft comment balloting and reconciliation cycles. So we assess the completeness. So we assert the QA report is acceptable, including any rationale for warnings or errors, and we assert the completeness and readiness of it's recorded in the minutes, and then we refer to the FHIR work group to say that we believe it is AFM level 1, and then it goes to FHIR work group approval, and then they can get published with FMM 1. Okay, so that's the process we're going to go through. We're going to do this in the next meeting, but as a precursor to that, we're going to do a bit of walkthrough now of what we've got in the IG. So, put it in the chat so you can follow along. So this will just be a general walkthrough. If you've got any areas you want to talk about or questions as we go, just jump in. Probably have to do it reasonably quickly. Didn't get as much time as I thought to go through this, but So we have the homepage. We've got information about project background. We'll put some information here around scope as well. We've got some general information about the RESTful interactions and a typical sequence. This is going to be, some of this material is going to be revised over the coming meetings and weeks before ballot around the guidance material. We've made most of the normative changes on the profile, so we've got to probably focus a bit now on guidance material. It gives you the layout of the guide and what's involved. So that's probably important for us to understand. We've got the homepage we're on now, which is about the introduction and scope of the guide. We have a conformance page, which sets the rules to claim conformance to the guide. So that's, well, if I'm saying I'm conformant with eRequesting, what does that mean? Then we've got some guidance around sex and gender, the data for interoperability mappings, relations to other specs, our variance statement, that's something we need to approve in the next meeting as well, and then some future about eRequesting. We've got a page on our use cases that were agreed way back in the beginning of eRequesting. We've got a security and privacy page, which is new, that's just gone in. And then we've got our artifacts. So we've got profiles and extensions, search parameters, terminology, actors and capability, a set of examples, and then the support to download the spec and the legal T's and C's. And changelog, which has everything we've got. What you see down the bottom in the footer here, we've got a QA report. That's what we're going to go through in the next meeting to look at the errors and warnings on the IG. So we'll go through this in detail. This is the build report and gives us any errors and warnings that we have. So you can see here's a list of each of our artifacts, whether there's errors, whether there's warnings on them, and then all the detail is listed out here. So as part of our AFMM process, we will be going through these and we will either be resolving these or accepting them, given we know why it's there and it's acceptable to maintain that warning. So that's going to be the focus of the next meeting. There's a lot of stuff in here, but our IG authors will walk us through it and help us understand and where we're at with that build. There's also down here the proposer change. So this is anything you identify in here that's an issue. You can propose a change that will enable you to raise a JIRA ticket. Then we can bring it to the TDG. You can let one of the co-chairs know. We get it on an agenda. The same for anything that's going through ballot. You would propose a change and then vote on that change. So during ballot, you can vote on existing changes that are already there, or you can create your own change. But so if you've anything you've got, anyone can propose a change. You don't have to be a HL7 member or anything. Anyone can propose it. Anyone can bring it and discuss it at the TDG. In the guidance here, we'll just go through quickly. Stop me, raise a question at any point if I'm going too fast, or you want to stop and talk about something more. This is the conformance page.
Michael, back on the page you just left.
Yep.
Where the blue diagram, yep, there. Why on the right is the AU eRequest filler client only read, yet the patient one search doesn't the filler search as well?
Updated this. This is something we need to update. So this is a lot of this material was drafted prior to ballot for comment. We didn't have the task resource at that point in time. So these definitely need revisiting. And like I said, I think that's going to be our focus with co-chairs and the like over the coming weeks prior to ballot, is ensure this guidance material is now up to date with what the TDG has agreed to, because we've been focusing on the normative changes, but now we need the guidance to reflect it.
Sorry, I thought that's what we were doing here now, right now, isn't it? No?
Oh no, we can. I think that's a. I don't think we want to go into the detail because we don't have the time, but it's an absolute point that this diagram needs updating. We need to revisit this diagram as well and see whether it's relevant or what updates we want to make to it as well. But yeah, absolutely. I think that is a point. If you do see anything that needs updating, raise it now, because it may be something that no one's thought about. But yes, I expect this to update. Under conformance, this talks about, we have our eRequesting actors defined in the actors and capabilities page. This gives a summary of shall implement mandatory and must support elements, shall implement REST API. It's really just a summary of what you need to do to be conformant. It talks about implementers advised to be familiar with terminology, RESTful API, search, resource formats, all this sort of general guidance. There's also some guidance here around missing data and suppressed data. And here talks about the different types of artifacts, about us having profiles and extensions, which is where our main focus has been, mainly on profiles. With profiles, we've been defining in eRequesting. We did a while back, we did the capabilities, or we did the actor definitions for placer, filler, patient, and server. I'll go through it shortly, but all of our decisions were made in the TDG, get reflected in the capability statements for each actor as well. When we agree on the obligation that, you know, the server shall, the placer may, all of those get reflected in the capability statements. This is about how you would, in your system, declare conformance to AU eRequesting. And this talks about exchange formats, JSON, XML, talks about the use of cardinality, must support. So have a look at this probably in your own time in more detail. If you do think things need changing, our next couple of meetings, we have the opportunity to make changes to informative content. You can raise a jury issue, you can talk to a co-chair, make some of those amendments for you. Then we've got guidance pages. So this is the guidance that we've, this is across all the AU IGs. We've got guidance here on the use of sex and gender. This is common content. So it's not something we've gone through specifically. We've got our mapping to AU eRequesting data for interoperability. So these are our mapping of the data groups and data elements that have come through AU eRequesting data for interoperability. So that's been developed with the clinical design group. We've been referencing this as we've come up through new things we've been discussing in the profiles. We've been putting it in the context of this. So you'll see here, for example, in AU eRec DI, their data group is service request, their data element is service name. We've implemented it in the AU eRequesting diagnostic requesting profile, request profile, and we've used service request code, which would map to the name. The clinical indication maps the reason code. The clinical context is our supporting info clinical context. Urgency maps to priority. So this is the mapping. So you can go back to the data for interoperability and see where we've implemented it in FHIR in this spec. So we've got all those mappings there. We've got relationship to other specifications. So this talks about AU eRequesting here is based on AU core, which is based on AU base, which just has the FHIR spec underneath, and talks about the relationships here between all the different specs we have in place at the moment. So it's just some general guidance on that relationship between the different IGs. And then we have a variance statement. So this is something we need to have in here as part of a HR7 AU IG. And this talks about variance we have from AU base or AU core. And we need to make a statement in the IG about this. So our current statement at the moment is that we have no variance from AU base, but we'll review this in the next meeting. We'll do a check beforehand to make sure that that is the case. But if we do have any variants, we need to state it here. We have added additional profiled resources that aren't in AU base. So we've done communication request and some variants of that, copy to patient urgent. We've done a My Health Record Consent Withdrawal profile, a document reference profile for clinical context, and we've done task. So we've, on top of AU base, we've done these additional things. For AU core as well, we're saying we have no variants, but we have implemented these profiles that are not in AU core. Same things, communication request, consent, coverage, document reference, clinical context, document reference, diagnostic request, imaging request, pathology request, and the tasks. So this is just a statement to that HL7AU requires, so that we make sure that the Australian IGs don't vary from base and core, or if they do it for a good known reason. So this is our statement on that. Future eRequesting, this is more just saying where we're at. This is release 1. This is our timeline for release 1, which we're aiming for publication in February. We talk about these 5 maturity levels, which we're going to target 1. And we've got a bit here about future candidate requirements under consideration. This needs an update, but this will be essentially talking about, maybe that's where we talked about those out of scope items for release 1. That's probably a good place for those to say these are things that we would consider in the future releases. That's actually an ideal place for it, I believe. Use cases. So these were agreed in the TDG very early on. This gives a description of our diagnostic imaging use cases, pathology use cases, and some generic use cases. Don't have time to go through that at the moment, but they are the use cases for eRequesting. This is not necessarily all of this will have been covered off in release 1, but they're the eRequesting use cases. Security and privacy, that's a requirement for H7AU IG. We've added that in. We agreed to that last meeting, so that's in there now. Then we get to the area where we've done most of our work on at the moment. So we have an artifact summary. This gives a sort of the links off to all the different artifacts that we've got in this profile. So we've got the actors, we've got the behaviors, the capability statements, search parameters, the abstract profiles, resource profiles, structured extensions, terminology, code systems, examples. So this is the kind of page you go where I don't know what I'm looking for. I can look on here and see everything that's part of eRequesting. We've then broken them down into their different sections, profiles and extensions. Again, this is where we've spent most of the time. So these are the eRequesting profiles we have defined. They're listed out here by their type: communication request, consent, coverage, document reference, service request, and task. We've got a diagram here to help you try and visualize how they relate together with consent, communication requests, and the other core profiles. And then we list out here the extensions. And these are extensions that are come from either the FHIR extension pack or AU based that are used in this profile. So we've got things like the ones we defined down here, like display sequence and fasting precondition, and then others that have come from AU base. Search parameters. We've just implemented this from the last decision. This is about the service request search parameter supporting info. So search parameters generally don't belong in downstream IGs. This should really move to AU base as a search parameter on the service request. The reason it's here at the moment, we decided it's something we needed and should have for eRequesting to support the include statements on our supporting information like clinical context and pregnancy status. What we want to do is test this out at the test event that's next week in Brisbane, make sure it's fit for purpose, make sure it's going to work. If we're happy with it, we will look to move that to AU base. So it can then be used by all Australian IGs. For the moment, it's here so that we can test it out, make sure it's okay before we move it on. And then we've got terminology. We've got a list of all the value sets that are used in some way in this IG. You can see this is the value set, like administrative gender, which profiles where it's used, AU core patient uses it. So if you're building a system, you need to understand what value sets you need, where they are, where they're used. This gives you the complete list. And you'll see here, like we've got eRequesting coverage, self-pay codes is used on the eRequesting coverage profile. There's a whole heap of things here from eRequesting, our communication request, our tags, our request status, our task business status. Then we've got other things that are just general FHIR ones. Some other important ones are down here. We've got the RCPA SPHIR value set, which is used on a pathology request. We've got the round scale radiology referral, which is used on the imaging request, and they're in NCTS. So this is a good reference to know all the value sets you may need.
Well, Michael,
Yep.
what's the difference between the value sets defined on the previous page, the FHIR artifacts? So you had a section called terminology value sets 6107.
Yeah.
In there, 6107. Yeah, there.
Yep.
What's the relationship difference between that and the terminology page? Why is this one far shorter than the one on the terminology page?
That's a good question.
Those ones are defined in the IG, whereas the other ones are defined in, say, AU base or the FHIR specification or NCTS.
Oh, so these ones are unique to our profile, where the other ones are all the ones dragged in from all the inherited profiles.
Yeah, these ones are defined within our implementation guide.
Yep, I get it. So the other one's more the totality of it.
All right, we're pretty much at time. I'm going to just race through. If you can stay on another 2 or 3 minutes, I'll just quickly finish this off. So that's all our terminology. We've got actors and capability statements. So these are our actors. You'll see the capability statements that belong to each of these. These talk about the specific capabilities that an actor needs to implement. You'll see here, for example, for the service request, you need to support these profiles. You need to support read, search, update, and create. You need to support these searches. You need to support these includes. So this is the full detail of what your system would need to support when they're acting as a particular actor. And it's got the conformance obligations like shall support read, should support create, shall support these search parameters, should support this search parameter. So this is the capability statement that really defines what your system needs to support when it's being one of these actors. The other important point here, we've got a set of examples. There are a whole heap of examples in here that cover all of the profiles that we're referencing. Example here, we've got an example service request. You can have a look at it in JSON format, see what one looks like. So you can have a look at these and see what it looks like when it's fully formatted. And probably the other one is the change log. Every decision we've made through the TDG, we've got a reference here to the JIRA. So this is our transparency on why we've made changes to the IG and under what tickets they've been made. And this will be more important too once we publish the version, because then you can see what's changed since the last version. When did that decision made? How did it get made? All those sorts of things. We've got full reference here to that. So we're going to touch over. That's a rough overview of the IG. Have a look in your own time, go through it. Like I said, next meeting, we're going to look at the FHIR maturity model, make sure all our artifacts are acceptable and can be moved to level 1. If you do have any issues you want to raise, bring forward before ballot, do this propose a change and raise them, talk to a co-chair, we'll get them on the agenda. thanks everyone. I'll just quickly go to, sorry.
Mike, I was going to say that the recurring meeting, this meeting ends here. Is there going to be another recurring meeting pushed out?
Yes, I wasn't aware of that. I'll fix that. So yes, we have meetings. So we have 3rd of July, 17th of July, 31st of July. So I will fix that and send out the recurring meeting. I'll probably create a new one. I think there was problems last time where they didn't update properly when I just updated the existing meeting session. So I will create a new set and send it out to the TDG and ongoing.
Thanks.
So thanks everyone. Thanks for your time.
All right, thanks guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.